Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law. For today's stream, we're going to talk a little bit more about deportation and the Trump administration, an issue that we've talked about many times recently relating to the cases of JGG and Garcia, relating to the Alien Enemies Act, and relating to issues with deportation in violation of outstanding court orders. The district court, of course, is continuing to work its way through trying to get Mr. Garcia back, or at least trying to get him a hearing, or at least trying to do something in furtherance of his due process rights. So far, that's not been going great. The Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit has rendered an opinion relating to some of this as well, saying they're not really thrilled. And meanwhile, in D.C. District Court, the court there has issued a preliminary finding of criminal contempt against the government and suggested that there's a potential that this could be prosecuted. And now we have further action from the U.S. Supreme Court as of early this morning, in addition to their prior cases relating to JGG and Garcia, previously having orders on those cases. We also have an order that was just entered this morning as well in an ongoing case, AARP versus Trump, relating to these issues. So we will read the order. There is before this court an application on behalf of a putative class of detainees seeking an injunction against the removal under the Alien Enemies Act. So the Trump administration would like to remove a whole bunch of people under the Alien Enemies Act, a thing that we've discussed before as well. The Supreme Court has discussed as well before, and they're like, yeah, you don't necessarily have absolute unilateral power to just be like Alien Enemies Act, yeet. There might be some other steps required. The matter is currently pending before the Fifth Circuit. Upon action by the Fifth Circuit, the Solicitor General is invited to file a response to the application before this court as soon as possible. The government is directed not to remove any member of the putative class of detainees from the United States until further order of this court. Justice Thomas and Alito dissent, with a statement from Justice Alito to follow at some point in the future. So, yeah, I mean, this is all heading into a path that we've sort of discussed before, where we're on a increasing collision course between the courts, including the Supreme Court, and the Trump administration relating to the right of the president to deport people under various law. And as I've sort of said before, and I'll say again, whatever the Alien Enemies Act might mean, it's like I know for certainty it's an act. It's a law of Congress. And therefore, in the same way that the judicial branch would interpret any law, because that's what they literally do with their time, one of the things they would also interpret is the Alien Enemies Act, because it's what they do with their time. And so for everyone saying, well, you know, this just means Trump can deport anyone he declares to be an enemy without due process, it's like, no, they've already said that. They said that in JGG, they said that in a slightly different context in Garcia, and they're saying it again now in AARP versus Trump. And of course, what they'll ultimately do as a relation to this class, who can say? But they didn't say, you know, just go forth, automatic yeet. They didn't say Trump can just do whatever he wants, send him out the door. They're like, no, we're going to take a little bit longer to look at this. And that's sort of where we're sitting on that as it all goes. So then I want to read an article kind of describing this a little bit more, because it provides a good summary of the situation with respect to some of these issues that are pending before the court. So I would like to read this from SCOTUS blog. The justices temporarily bar the government from removing Venezuelan men under the Alien Enemies Act. This is dealing with multiple people, a putative class. So like at the moment, you can't remove any of them while further action is pending. And this was filed apparently very early Saturday morning. It seems like, based on there's no timestamp on it, but seems like it was basically on the midnight border, there or thereabouts. Over dissent by two of the conservative justices, the Supreme Court temporarily bars the Trump administration from removing a group of Venezuelan men currently in immigration custody in the northern region of Texas under the 18th century wartime law. So one of the many issues, of course, with respect to the Alien Enemies Act is, does it apply to these people at all? Now, could these people be deported for some other reason? Perhaps, right? But the Trump administration wants to deport them under the Alien Enemies Act. They're trying to use this specific authority. Is there other authority they might be able to deport these people? Yes, there might be. But they're not making that argument. They're making this argument about Alien Enemies Act means we can just yeet everybody. And so far, the courts aren't buying the you can just yeet everybody process. Are they illegal immigrants? If they are, then just go through a normal deportation process. And again, that can be incredibly cursory by comparison to anything that you're used to. But the Trump administration wants to use the Alien Enemies Act so they don't have to do the normal process. And, and even in the Alien Enemies process right now, it's still like something, even if it's different. Even if it's different than a normal deportation process, it's still a process. Perhaps even more cursory than a standard deportation process, I can't say, but it's something. The prohibition came in the unusual overnight order that followed the Friday evening appeal from lawyers representing the men who told the justices that dozens or hundreds of detainees are in imminent and ongoing jeopardy of being removed from the United States without notice and opportunity to be heard, in direct contravention of a ruling by the justices less than 2 weeks ago, which said exactly that. It said, with respect to the Alien Enemies Act, you have to give them notice and an opportunity to be heard, plus habeas. And they're like, but they're not doing it. And so the Supreme Court's like, yeah, don't remove them. We're not going to let you remove them while this is all working its way through the courts. We're taking another look at it. In a brief unsigned order released to reporters just before 1 a.m. Saturday morning, the court noted that the dispute is currently pending before the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit. Once that court acts, the court explained, the Solicitor General should file a response to the Supreme Court to the detainee's request to block the removal as soon as possible. So basically, they're giving you an expedited review at the Supreme Court once the Fifth Circuit is done, but they don't want to intervene until then. So they don't want to yank this out of the Fifth Circuit docket. They could, but they don't want to. They want to give the Fifth Circuit a chance to get to it first. And after the justices issued their order, the Fifth Circuit turned down the detainee's request for a stay, calling it premature. But the court emphasized in clear language the government should not remove any members of the putative class from the United States until further order of this court, which sounds suspiciously like an injunction from the U.S. Supreme Court to me, right? I mean, that's an order from the Supreme Court. So even if the Fifth Circuit for some reason said, deport them all, Pokemon style, you still couldn't deport them all because the U.S. Supreme Court said no. You have to come back to us and ask. So that's where we're at. Justice Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito dissented from the court's order. They did not provide an explanation from their votes on Saturday morning, but the order indicated a statement from Alito would follow, a relatively rare but not unprecedented move in light of the hour which the order was issued. So normally the order and the opinions relating to the order would come at the same time. Especially with the Supreme Court, you normally expect that at the same time, but here the order came and then the opinion will follow at a later time. So, I mean, it is what it is. But the order is not the same thing as the opinion, right? The opinion explains the rationale, but the order is existent, notwithstanding the rationale. And this is true, and the Supreme Court has clarified this with respect to its own decisions. There is a U.S. Supreme Court case that said exactly this. Like, even if the rationale for the Supreme Court's decisions get undermined, only the Supreme Court can reverse its decisions. And that's kind of true for any court, right? That's true also with respect to, for example, Mr. Garcia, right? So was the rationale for the withholding of removal status still good rationale? Well, it doesn't really matter, right? The change of the rationale might be basis to go to court and get the order changed, right? It's like, okay, the underpinnings of your reasons are no longer valid, therefore change the order. But you can't just ignore the order because the underpinnings have changed. That's not how that works. You actually have to go to court and get the order changed. Be like, oh, your reasons no longer make sense. I need a new order. Could have done that, but didn't do that. And until you do that, the order remains in place. despite whatever changes on the circumstances may befall, right? And yeah, I mean, that's should be fairly self-evident. Just because you don't think that, just because you believe in your own mind things have changed, doesn't mean that you get the ability to just ignore a court because you feel like it. The dispute ends the latest chapter and challenges the Trump administration's efforts to remove non-citizens who are designated as members of the Venezuelan gang under a March 15th executive order issued by President Donald Trump. The order relied on the Alien Enemies Act, a 1798 law that allows the president to detain or deport citizens of an enemy nation without a hearing or any review or other review, by a court if Congress declares war or there is an invasion or predatory incursion, which I still think means it has to be done by the government. And as we discussed in a prior stream, maybe it can be terrorism if that's state-sponsored terrorism. Maybe that is sufficient. So I have revised my opinion on this issue. Like if it is terrorism, fine, but it still has to be state-sponsored in some way. I think for this to be triggered, it has to be an act of a military nature, even if terrorism qualifies as an act of a military nature for the purposes of the statute. But you still need that like official action. And again, is that true? Is that the situation we're in? I don't know if it's true or not. But I also don't know what evidence the government has, or they certainly haven't demonstrated it in any finding relevant to these proceedings. They haven't demonstrated that they believe it to be true or shown a rationale for why it's true. And I don't think they can just say it's true magically. I don't think that works, because then the language of the statute wouldn't mean anything. If they could just say, oh, it's an incursion, trust us, bro, well, then the language is completely open-ended. And I don't think it's probably that. So I have my doubts it's that open. The law, of course, has only been invoked in 3 times in U.S. history: during the War of 1812, World War I, and World War II. I will take note, of course, all 3 of which were wars. So there's that. Trump's March 15th order found that the large Venezuelan gang known as Trens de Agura is perpetrating, attempting, and threatening an invasion or predatory incursion against the territory of the United States. Yeah, but isn't the United States position also that gang no longer exists? I thought that was part of their position, right, for deporting Mr. Garcia. Or did I misunderstand? Because one of the things that people in chat said, for example, was, well, this gang has been eliminated. They've been eliminated, so there's no reason not to deport Mr. Garcia. But wait, which is it? Do they exist or don't they? If they don't exist, and that's your rationale for deporting Mr. Garcia because they don't exist anymore. But wait a second, the Trump administration just said they do exist. And in fact, they're such a threat that they're continuing as we speak to perpetrate, attempt, or threaten an invasion. Well, it can't be both. It can't be both. They don't exist and also they exist and are perpetrating an invasion. So like, which is it? Which is it? And if they do continue to exist, then how do you deport Mr. Garcia? Because even assuming you could deport him because the underpinnings had changed, they hadn't changed because one of the underpinnings was the gang. Well, that's El Salvador, not Venezuela. I'm messing up my people. I'm sorry. I apologize. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of these things. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Yeah, it was a different gang in El Salvador. I'm sorry. You guys have been screaming at me for a little while, I'm sure, in chat. I wasn't listening to chat or watching chat because I'm trying to get through this. But I apologize. I messed up Venezuela and El Salvador in my mind. So sorry, my mistake. So maybe both those things can be true at the same time. I retract my previous Stark. I apologize for the error. As a result, he ordered any Venezuelans who are 14 years of age or older can be apprehended, restrained, secured, and removed as alien enemies. A group of non-citizens in immigration custody went to federal court in Washington, D.C., even before Trump's order was issued, seeking to stave off their removal and to challenge their designation under the Alien Enemies Act. The case was assigned to U.S. District Judge James Boasberg, who barred the government from moving the individual plaintiffs in the case and later anyone else under the Alien Enemies Act. In a hearing to the same date the order was issued, Boasberg ordered the government to return any flights of non-citizens that are already taken off to return to the United States. News reports indicate that more than 200 non-citizens were taken from the United States to El Salvador. Yeah, this is one of the reasons I'm confused. Even the article is talking about both issues in the same breath. So it's like trying to keep it all straight in your mind can get a little confusing sometimes when even the article is talking about both. Anyways, pressing on. News reports indicate that more than 200 non-citizens were taken from the United States to El Salvador on March 15th, when planes landing there after Boasberg issued the written order. They were taken to El Salvador's notorious terrorism confinement center, a maximum security mega prison where their heads were shaved. After the United States Court of Appeals for District of Columbia turned down the Trump administration request to pause the order, the then acting Solicitor General went to the Supreme Court. She told justices the dispute presents fundamental questions about who decides how to conduct sensitive national security operations in this country, the president or the judiciary. Well, I don't know that this qualifies as a national security operation, really. That's part of the framing of the issue, right? We're talking about deporting people. That might be in the furtherance of national security, but to say it's a national security issue and therefore they can put everything in national security is problematic. Thanks for the super chat. I'll respond to it at the end of the stream. In a ruling on April 7th, the Supreme Court granted the Trump administration's request to put a hold on an order, explained that challenges to the designation under the Alien Enemies Act must be brought as a petition for habeas corpus. That is a challenge to the legality of the individual detention in a place where detainees are being held, rather than Northern Washington, as the challenge under the federal law governing administrative agencies. The court also indicated that anyone detained under the Alien Enemies Act must receive notice after the date of this order. They're subject to removal under law. Moreover, the court added the government must provide notice that within reasonable time in such matter as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in proper venue before the removal courts. The detainees went to court in Northern District of Texas on April 16th, asking the federal judge there to temporarily block the removal of the Venezuelan men in immigration custody there under the Alien Enemies Act. The U.S. District Judge, a Trump appointee, on Friday rejected the men's request to block the removal after the government told the court it would not try to remove two men individually named in the complaint while their habeas petitions are pending. Hendricks indicated that in light of the Supreme Court's April 7th ruling and the government's general representation about the procedures necessary in these cases, the broader group of Venezuelan detainees is likely not facing an imminent threat. But since then, lawyers for the detainees wrote the Venezuelan men in immigration custody in Texas have been notified that their removal under the AEA could be imminent. Removal without sufficient notice and time to seek habeas is a clear violation of the ruling. Yeah, you got to still do that. The government, the lawyers said, has established a lightning-fast timeline. Moreover, they note to the extent the government has notified the men of its intent to remove them, those notices are only in English, even though the overwhelming number of people designated under the AEA speak only Spanish, and do not tell the men they can challenge their designation as an alien enemy in federal court. The government is also not providing any notification to the men's lawyers. Not super promising. Emergency relief is necessary, the lawyers emphasize, not only to preserve the status quo and prevent permanent and irreversible harm to the men currently in immigration custody who would be covered by the court's order, but also preserve the court's jurisdiction in light of the government's position that it need not return individuals, even those mistakenly removed, in reference to the case of Mr. Garcia, a Maryland man who the Trump administration concedes was deported to El Salvador as a result of what they're claiming, at least, is an administrative error. The lawyers for the Venezuelan men stressed they did not seek to stop the government prosecuting anyone who's committed a crime or removing anyone who can be legally removed under federal immigration. They were seeking, they said, only to have the Supreme Court preserve the status quo so the proposed class members will not be sent to the notorious prison before the judicial system can afford them due process, which, as limited as that might be, they're still entitled to that. And I apologize again for not having it on screen as I was reading some of that. The Trump administration is likely to file a response for the detainees' appeal soon. Detainees will then have an opportunity to file a reply. The Supreme Court could then act at any time. So that kind of brings us to the end of the situation for the moment, and things are heating up between things as we're heading on to a collision course between the Trump administration and the courts relevant to all this. And where it goes from there, who knows? But not to fun and exciting places, I don't believe. I'm very concerned about it, as we've discussed. So let me read some of your super chats and other chats in stream, and then I'll wrap the stream up. All right, let's see. First of all, for the super chat that came in, $5 from Grassroot Hedgeman. First of all, Liam became a member at the uncivil posse level. Thank you. Grassroots Hedgeman said, you may have already covered this, but how the hell do we deport someone to a place they aren't from? How is that even possible? Well, if the other country agrees, then, I mean, it's possible. Obviously, they have to say yes, but they might for any number of reasons. $5 from Nate the Lawyer says, MS-13 is a gang. Also, Trump is declaring emergency powers to an extreme. The Supreme Court needs to stop it. Yes, I mean, I don't object to a lot of this in principle. I don't want there to be gang members in our country either. But how do you know they're members of a gang? How do you know they're illegal immigrants? I mean, how do you know these things? There has to be some process in order to go through. And, you know, I'm pretty hardcore on the ultimate issue. I believe in deporting all the illegal immigrants. I'm fine with that. I'm totally fine with deporting all the illegal immigrants. I believe in the rule of law. Deport them all. Deport them all. It's fine by me. But, you know, we still have to go through a process, as, you know, even as superficial as that is, as they often can be in the context of illegal immigration. And, you know, but we still have to go through the lawful process, or change the process by Congress. One of the two would be fine. Let me see if there's any chats relating to this. $5 from Slim West. Specifically, why does the Trump administration need to follow the Supreme Court? Why can't he just ignore them? Well, your question really shouldn't be the Trump administration in this sentence. Your question should be, why does the president need to follow the Supreme Court? Because Trump just happens to be the president, but it's not quite the same thing. So the correct question, at least in my opinion, is why does the president, whoever he or she happens to be, Republican or Democrat, whether they're doing things left friendly or right friendly, conservative friendly or progressive friendly, why do they have to obey the Supreme Court? Well, I'll give you a couple answers to your question. The legal answer to your question is because the Constitution gives to the Supreme Court and such other lower courts as Congress may establish the power to adjudicate any question in law or equity. That's literally their job. Their job is to interpret the law. And also, the president has no inherent power relating to immigration because Congress creates the uniform rules of immigration. It's a congressional power. So all power that the president has relating to immigration is all power that Congress gave him. He doesn't have any inherent power for immigration. And so he can only do what Congress authorized him to do. And obviously the president has to faithfully execute the law. It's part of his oath to faithfully execute the law. In this case, the law and powers that Congress gave him. So that's the legal answer to your question. The pragmatic answer to your question of why does the president have to follow the Supreme Court is, I suppose he doesn't, but then of course no president does, regardless of whether they're Republican or Democrat, regardless of whether they're doing things for conservative reasons or progressive reasons, whether they're doing things for right-wing reasons or left-wing reasons, right? And so the problem is, if Trump can do it, any president can do it. And basically you have essentially at that point stripped away the judicial branch completely and made the president the sole judge. Because if the president alone can determine not to follow decisions he finds to be unconstitutional, if that is a presidential power, then you have now transferred all the judicial department's power to the executive. Because now he's executor and judge, because he can do anything he wants regardless of what the courts say. So you've gone from three branches of government to two branches of government. You have president, and also you have combined, it's even worse than that, because at least if you combined Congress and the president, you'd be merging all the political power, because some countries do that. They merge the president and the executive. That's the parliamentary system, right? The prime minister is a member of Congress. He's a minister. He's just a member of Congress, and he serves at the Congress's pleasure. He's an extension of the legislature. And so there basically is no distinguishment between the legislature and the executive. They're kind of the same thing. The legislature can also kick out the president, prime minister in this scenario at any time on a no confidence vote. So some countries merge all the political power. But this situation is worse because not only because you're merging the political and legal power, you're merging these things that are distinct concepts, at least in my mind, politics and law, you're merging them under one person. So now you have the president who has both political power and now effectively legal power. And you're well on your way to a king if you weren't already there, right? It's like all that's left is for the legislative branch to impeach him. Because if the president can just determine that, the law means whatever it means, then Congress's laws are irrelevant. Because Congress can pass a law saying, the president can only deport people on Sundays. And he says, I think it means every day of the week. And then there's no court to stop him. So the laws of Congress become meaningless. So you've now effectively transferred legislative authority to the president. And all that's left maybe is the power to impeach, maybe is all that's left. So the pragmatic answer to your question is, if you let that happen, you've basically created a king, an elected king, but still. And so that's a problem. Hopefully that answers your question. $5 from Grassroots Hegemon. Good. I hypothetically deport 200 million people to El Salvador. Could build prisons fast enough, and it's only conditional on their acceptance? I don't understand your question. I mean, whether or not they have presence or not is irrelevant to whether or not they're deported or not, right? I have no problem deporting all of El Salvador's citizens who are here illegally to El Salvador. Whether there are prisons for them or not is not my problem, right? They're just not allowed to be here. That's El Salvador's problem. So what are we supposed to do with all these people? I was like, I don't know. They're your citizens. You figure it out. So, I mean, that's a completely separate issue. But yeah. $5 from Gnarly Bonesfield. What's constitutional crisis? Trump will just pack the Supreme Court to fix it. Yeah, that possibly too. $2 from Patman's Pet Goldfish. The process is the rule of law. Well, it's part of it, at least. Yes. Thank you for your super chat. And of course, in the end, as I keep trying to remind you guys constantly, in the end, this is not about Trump or his policies. This is about the president. Any rule that you create for Trump will be a rule. Any power you give Trump is a power any president can yield. It's a power they can wield. So, like, as I keep trying to constantly remind you guys, is like, if you do this, you do it for all presidents, because why wouldn't every president just be able to do exactly the same thing? And so, and also once you give the executive all this power, good luck on getting it back. You know what I mean? It's like we created the separation of powers and checks and balances to prevent any one person from accumulating too much power. If you are of the view that the judiciary should be effectively sidelined at the whim of the president, you can't undo that when it's a president you don't like. And you may like the fact that they're deporting people, but you may not necessarily like what the future president is doing under some other law. And then you have no recourse because you've abolished the group that was supposed to keep the president in check, or one of them at least. And then your only remedies are maybe political. And good luck with that. Yeah, and courts are generally subordinate to the parliament too. Yeah, fair. Yeah. So yeah, in many systems of law, the courts are also part of the parliament. So yeah, I mean that was true and arguably still is true even in the United Kingdom, because it used to be the House of Lords was the Supreme Court, and now they have something called the Supreme Court, but it's still Lords. So depending on how you look at the House of Lords and the Supreme Court of the UK, you can make the argument that that the Parliament is now the king. So yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily sure that works for us, but fair enough. Atlas Divides Studio says you can't undo abuse of loopholes and abusive systems through legal framework in a meaningful way. You can't have abuse on one side and hand wringing and tied hands on the other. Well, I really don't think the solution to that problem is to get rid of the rules. Like you're so frustrated with the exercise of loopholes that you want to just abolish all the rules altogether and say, YOLO. I really hope that you're comfortable with the presidents you don't like suddenly wielding this immense power. I really hope you be careful for what you wish for. You might just get it. I'm trying to tell you guys. Ratcast says, imagine ignoring the law and pouring millions of criminals, then pretending to care about immigration law. Yeah, not directed at you. Okay. The Dems were all worried about packing the Supreme Court. Yeah, I mean, that was a stupid thing to do. Because if they pack the court, then we pack the court. Right? It was a stupid thing to do. And, because they are not thinking about what happens if you start playing these games. They're not thinking either. $5 from Amazing Disgrace. Do judges make these judgment of their own accord? Or is it Democrats showing the transfer power just for show? Well, judges make decisions based on legal principles and also precedent. Our legal system in the United States is a common law tradition, which means that the decisions of the court are based on the history of decisions of the court. So there is a long history that guides court decisions, at least when they're doing their job correctly. So they are bounded by the past, especially if you're an originalist, because you're interpreting the Constitution as it was understood, right? So if you're trying to understand like what something like the freedom of speech means, or something like what the right to keep and bear arms means, if you're trying to understand those concepts, you understand those concepts by going to the common law and looking what were they talking about when they were talking about like the freedom of speech, or what were they talking about when they were talking about the right to keep and bear arms. And you can basically do that for any other provision in the Constitution. And you can also do it basically for any other statute, rule, or regulation, because they're all like built on this huge tradition. So, and again, like when it comes to the Alien Enemies Act, at least you're starting with the words on the page. The words on the page mean something, at least in principle. So it's like, well, Congress wrote that the president has here's how I would think about it. Let me answer the question this way. Here's how I would think about it. It's like Congress wrote that the president has the ability to deport people from countries that we're at war with, or which there's an insurrection or a whatever the other term was. And it's like, okay, so that means he can deport them for those reasons, not other reasons. He can deport them for those reasons. And then, okay, what is an act of war? What is an insurrection? What does that mean? Right? What is the scope of that? It has boundaries. It has some boundaries. It has because it's a concept that has limits somewhere. And it's like, okay, and then who gets to decide that? And what kind of review is there for that? What kind of checks, if any, is there relating to that? But those are sort of the questions, how you would go about trying to address those questions. And then also, of course, as a judge, I'd be thinking about what happens down the line, because as I mentioned, we work on a common law system. We work on precedent. So in the same way that judges today are thinking about what happened 50, 100, or 500 years ago, judges today are thinking about what happens 50 or 100 or 500 years from now, or they're at least trying to. They're trying to think about, like, what are the various ways that this principle can be applied in various contexts. You know, what does this rule look like, and what are different ways that this rule could be used, abused, and other things, right? So it's sort of relating to that and trying to properly understand the past as well as the future. And so it's not really just based on a whim. You know, it's based on trying to understand, at a minimum, what the words of Congress meant, and trying to give them scope, because Congress gave them scope, and trying to effectuate that scope. So I hope that answers your question. Could I explain how difficult it can be to fight against illegal deportation of a citizen from outside the United States? I have no clue. I think people have the impression it's as simple as it is in the States. I have no idea. I have no idea what the processes are in other countries for deporting illegal citizens. I have no idea. He's a criminal. Should he be deported to another country? Again, I have no problem with deporting people. I want to make this clear. Deport them all. This is fine. I have no problem with this. Rule of law. But one of the reasons, see, this is like all principle to me. It's all in the same principle. One of the reasons I say deport them all is because you're talking about illegal aliens. Well, illegal aliens by their nature are not here according to the rule of law, right? I mean, duh, right? I mean, the very fact you're calling them illegal aliens necessarily means they're not here according to the rule of law, right? Right. It must be true. It necessarily has to be true. So if they're not here according to the rule of law because they're illegal, well, then deport them because they're not here legally. So deport them, right? So I have no problem with that, but it's all rooted in the rule of law. It's like, these people are not here legally. I can go read the law, so can you. They're not here legally, so send them home. And then it's their home country's problem. Let them figure it out. You know, they're your citizens. You figure it out. So, like, yeah, but it's like, but still we have to follow the rules in the process. Not for a list of reasons. Again, it's like, how do we know this guy's an illegal? How do we know? How do we know he's an illegal alien? Of what country? And so forth and so on. How do we know these things? So it's like, someone's got to be able to make that decision, and someone's got to be able to review it, it seems to me. In most systems, there's no executive branch, it's all parliament. Yeah, as I was saying, right? The prime minister is part of parliament. So in the end, the executive and legislative branch are the same thing. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly so. You heard that Tiffany Henyard was arrested this morning by the feds. If that's true, many of my Christmases are going to come true. I want my perp walk video. I need my perp walk video. I need an indictment from the feds. Please give it to me. Give it to me. Please give me my perp walk video. Please give me my indictment, nice federal government. Please, I beg you, I need it in my life. Num, 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 num. Improve my day. Num, 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 num. $20 from Grassroot Hegemon. I guess that's my gripe. The way this act now, as far as I can see, would let my dumb ass become president and deport all of Indiana because they drive so in the left lane. Where's the hard boundary? Yeah, I mean, and you wouldn't say you're doing it for that reason. You would, your real reason is you're deporting them because they drive in the left lane. But the reason, of course, you're going to say is because they're here illegally, don't you know? Right? So, like, your stated reason and your real reason, because you're a smart person, you're not going to say the quiet part out loud. Oh, I'm deporting them because, they're here illegally. And, like, how do you adjudicate that, right? Hamilton says, in 6 months after the economy continues to tank, which isn't discussed enough unless one has financial background, minds will change. Well, be that as it may, Hamilton, be that as it may, even if it should change, first of all, I'm not sure that's necessarily true. But even if it is true, well, first of all, I don't think it's necessarily as catastrophic as you might be indicating. I think it's true to some degree, but I don't think it's necessarily as catastrophic as your chat suggests. But even assuming it is as catastrophic as you suggest, we should still do this by rule of law, would be my position. So if we need to have foreign workers inside the United States for whatever reason, then that's fine too. I have no problem making that case. Just do it legally is all I say. So if your proposition is, we need these people in the country in order to do these jobs, cool. Maybe you're right. Maybe that would be a good thing for the United States to do. Maybe it would be in our interests to have these people in the United States doing these jobs. Maybe that would be a good thing to do. And then my suggestion to you would be, let's go off to Congress and let's pass, the Foreign Guest Worker Act or whatever. And, then we'll have the people here and it'll be done legally and then everyone will be happy-ish. But, let's actually do this, in a logical, reasoned path. That's all I'm saying. Let's just do it. Let's just do it by the book. Right? If you think that we should have more legal guest workers, cool. Great. Let's go debate that in Congress. That's one of the things Congress does with its time, or at least is supposed to. What do I think about district judges making nationwide orders? I'm strongly skeptical, as I've discussed repeatedly. I'm strongly skeptical of judges making global, universal, national injunctions. I don't know necessarily what the answer to this problem is. The U.S. Supreme Court is having oral argument on this issue next month, surprisingly enough, and with apparently an eye towards a decision by the end of June. So apparently we're going to have an answer in 2.5 months. Holy shit. But yeah, I'm strongly skeptical of district judges having these powers. I think it's deeply problematic. What is the solution? I'm not sure. Every answer has problems. They're all bad. They're not necessarily all equally bad, but it's just like, which poison do you like best, basically? So I don't necessarily know I know the answer, but I appreciate that they're apparently taking up the question. Amazing Disgrace for $5 says, I was unclear, sorry. Does a judge just see something they believe is illegal and start the procedure on their own, or does someone have to file suit? Someone has to file suit. Yeah, the courts don't do anything unless they're asked. Yeah, the courts don't. The courts just are sitting there until someone asks them a question. They're just sitting, they're just sitting at their desk, twiddling their thumbs, waiting for someone to ask them a question. But yeah, they don't go out and do anything unless they're asked questions. Fair enough. I appreciate your question. Men as a U.S. citizen that's been deported from the U.S. despite having citizen, trying to fight the courts to get back in the U.S. after being wrongfully deported. Well, if you're a U.S. citizen, you could always cross the border illegally, which technically would be illegal, but they can't deport you again. So, can you get to Mexico and cross the border? Can you prove you're a citizen? Then you might be arrested for illegally crossing the border, but at least you'll be back in the United States. It's probably what I would do in that circumstance, but thank you. Grassroots Hegemon. I don't get sent all of New Jersey and Indiana, Quebec because they're doing crime. Not yet, but I'm working on it. Fair. Radcast says, I really hope some of you MS-13 supporters get a chance to learn about their vibrant, robust culture. Yeah, once again, at the sake of trying to clarify this point, I don't really like gang members. Please arrest them. Please arrest the gang members. RICO's great for the criminal. Please charge them with the criminal RICO. I don't like the gang members. I don't like the cartel. Please prosecute them. Please arrest them. Please put them in jail. And if for that matter, please deport them. That's fine. I'm fine with all those things. Please do that. But still, could we please do the rules while we're at it? That'd be nice. Just saying. Yeah. Hamilton says, I don't agree that all illegals should work here without proper papers in consideration. Oh, I don't agree at all that illegals should work here without proper papers in consideration. Oh, that's fair enough. Yeah. And then what does it mean to have proper papers? Right. So that's fine. Right. So like, but I'm just like, to the principle, right? If they're here illegally, but we should have them here because it's in the US interest, which I think is the right way to look about it, right? I think Trump is right in this respect too. I think make America great again, right? We should be looking at immigration from a posture of what benefits the United States. That makes sense to me. Like, does it benefit the United States to bring you into our country? If yes, great. If not, not so much. Like we want to improve our country, not approve it. So, you know, if your immigration policy basically boils down to will having your presence in the United States make us better, if that's your immigration policy, I'm on board with that. Like, and then if your policy doesn't make it worse, then, you know, go away. I'm on board with that too. But like, as a policy matter, as a legal matter, I'm still back to just follow the law. So if it's like, as a policy matter, it would be good to have these people work in the United States, but it's not legal. Let's make it legal. Right? We can fix this problem. We have the technology, right? If it would be good, but it's not legal, let's just make it legal. Problem solved, right? Problem solved. But let's just do the thing, and that will be fine. How about the assignment of cases and judges who are not on call grabbing cases because they're activists? I don't believe that's true. To the best of my understanding, cases are still going through their normal process. I don't believe judges are snatching cases. I don't believe that's true. Yeah. And also, if they're overseas, I think we should go clear and present danger. Let's change clear and present danger from an action movie into a documentary. Perhaps less with the betraying our own troops part. If we could leave that part of the movie out, that'd be great. But other than the let's betray our own troops part of the movie, let's just do clear and present danger. That'd be great. Let's bomb the cartels, blow them up, and all the rest of that. That's fine. You don't get due process overseas. Lol. Lol. Bossberg grabbed the case. Okay. I don't know anything about that. I'm also not sure that even the news article that wrote it necessarily understands it, but, you know, anyways. Did everyone enjoy my stream earlier today? I thought it was worth the joke. To Denny's. It was a very dry, very subtle joke. But those who know, and those who don't know were just wildly confused. But that's okay. If he's going to send an American citizen to El Salvador, I disagree with that. Of course, you can't deport an American citizen by definition. Dispatch Debbie says, does it benefit the USA if you deport all migrants working on farms, hotels, hospitals? I believe there's a racist component to this. Well, again, I rooted in rule of law. That's been my position consistently. It has nothing to do with race. At least to me, it doesn't. It has to do with the rules. Are they here legally? Great. If they're not here legally, deport them. Should the law be changed? Maybe. Let's change the law. All right? I mean, for me, it's all rooted in rule of law. I'd like to believe I'm relatively colorblind about this. I just want to follow the law. I have nothing against legal immigration. Whether or not we should have legal immigration at all, of course, is a policy consideration. Maybe some of you guys think we shouldn't have legal immigration. You can make that case to Congress too, for all I care. I mean, that's fine by me. If you don't think we should have any legal immigration, maybe we shouldn't have legal immigration. I don't know. But, you know, take it to Congress. Let them sort it out. That's what they're there for. So if you think we should have more immigrants, great. If you think we should have less immigrants, also great. Go to Congress. Let me know how it turns out, and I'll just stick over on my end doing the law. Let me know when Congress does whatever it is that they do, let me know when they're done, and then I'll go try to apply whatever it is they came up with to the best of my opinion. If Congress says, how about no more immigration? I'll do that. If Congress says, yes, please, we love the immigration, it's the greatest thing ever, I'll do that too. Either way is fine. Just let me know what Congress has done, and I'll get back to you. As some of you may already know, by the way, the watch build kind of was a bust. Sad to say, I did a little stream on it earlier today. So for those of you who don't know, I'm trying to take up watchmaking as a hobby. I decided this would be fun. And also I have tremors in my hand, and I've had tremors in my hand since I've been 10. So I'm trying to do incredibly fine work with poor fine motor skills, which went about as well as you might be reasonably willing to project that went. It didn't work. I wound up destroying the dial and the hands and possibly the movement. So it didn't go well, but never fear. We've already put in our cart more items for the future for another go. So we're going to order more movements and more faces and more hands, and we'll give it another try in 4 weeks and see if we can do any better the next time around. And also, I appreciate that Meme Copium said that I am forgiven for all my sins. That's nice. I'm nice to know that the W today was so big that it releases me and absolves me of any internet sin I've ever done up to this point. I appreciate the pardon. Thank you. My respect for people who do this for a living has increased. Especially like some of these Chinese factories, it's like they're producing some relatively good stuff for like $100. It's like, damn, how are they doing this for $100? Right? It's like, damn. I mean, I know labor's cheaper, but still shit, you know, and then they can ship it to me for $100. Damn. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. If Tiffany Henyard has been arrested and there's a perp walk video, we will definitely do a stream for that. Also, by the way, for those of you wondering, yes, I will still be doing a Nick Rekieta catch-up stream, but I'm waiting for the transcript. I figure that that's the best thing to do. I'm going to wait for the transcript from the hearing and then do it together with the order. And maybe I'll wait a little bit beyond that and see if the body cam footage comes out, because if it does, then I can dispose of all those things and I don't have to do another stream unless he's rearrested. So yeah, maybe next weekend, depending, but yeah, I'm waiting for the transcript at a bare minimum, but I will cover it when the transcript is available. So that is the working plan there. All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you so much for those of you in chat who are participating and spending time with me. It's really appreciated. I love you all. Until later, I've been Uncivil Law. Thank you for tuning in. Till later, my friends, cheers and goodbye.